You think your relationship is fine? You still text every day. Still see each other on weekends. Still say goodnight regularly. You believe that genuine love will naturally find a way to settle, to move past small differences, to last. But have you ever asked yourself, why are you always the one trying harder? Why are you always the one who has to adjust, to stay quiet, to let things go? And if every single day you have to strain just to keep things okay, is that still a relationship worth staying in? This isn't a checklist to conclude. It's not a place for judgment. But if you see yourself in even one of these signs, then maybe it's time to look closely, because some loves don't end with betrayal, but with quiet cracks that were there from the very beginning. Love begins with emotion, and emotion is intense. In the beginning, everything feels magical. Their eyes make you forget time. A late-night message keeps you awake for hours. But if the only thing holding two people together is emotion, then what remains when that emotion fades? No one lives forever in the intoxication of the beginning. A spark can't be the only foundation, because eventually, those eyes no longer make your heart race. The messages no longer keep you waiting, and the conversations start to feel empty, because you realize there's nothing truly shared between you, except the memory of once finding each other exciting. A love built only on emotion is like a house with no foundation. It's beautiful, fast, passionate, but a gentle breeze can bring it down, because you can't build a future on something that changes day by day. You need understanding. You need shared values. You need something to hold on to and stay for, even when the feelings aren't loud. Otherwise, what you call love is just a high, and highs always pass. You think passion is enough to make someone stay, then wait for what comes next. You don't have to love all their friends, but if you always feel uncomfortable, always feel like you don't belong whenever you step into their world, then it's no longer just a matter of different personalities. Oh, friends aren't just people they hang out with. They're the ones who know the hidden parts. The old stories, the versions of them you may have never seen. And if you don't like them, chances are you haven't truly accepted who your partner once was and still is. You might find their friends rude, loud, or simply not your type. But the more important question is, if you can't fit into the closest relationships in their life, how will you fit into their life at all? Because people don't separate love and friendship. They can't throw away half their world just because the other half doesn't like it. You don't have to become best friends with their friends. But if you always feel like you're on the outside, like you're being forced to endure, like you're hiding your real feelings, the connection will slowly wear down. Love isn't just between two people. It's between two worlds trying to intertwine. And if you think the best way is to cut everything else off just to keep them to yourself, then you need to hear number 3. In the beginning, wanting to be together all the time feels natural. You see them in every moment. Every evening without them feels empty. But when both of you start revolving your lives around each other, gradually letting go of friends, passions, personal interests, what was once romantic can become an emotional trap. Love is connection, not merging. You don't have to become one to prove closeness. When every decision, every activity, every feeling is tied to the other person, you start to lose your own boundaries. You become less of yourself. You stop doing what you love. You stop seeing the people you care about. You stop growing the parts of you that once made you feel alive. Intimacy shouldn't erase personal space. A relationship should be a place where you can be yourself, not a place where you dissolve. If being apart for a few days makes you anxious, restless, or lost, that's no longer love. That's dependence. And all dependence, sooner or later, becomes suffocating. Love shouldn't be something that makes you forget who you are. It should be what helps you remember every day. But if you've grown used to being the one always holding things together, always initiating, always carrying the weight, then it's time to listen to what comes next. You're the one who plans every date. You're the one who starts the conversation. You're the one who apologizes first. Even when it's not always your fault. You keep in touch. You remind. You check in. You worry. and you call it love. But if all the effort to maintain things comes from one side, then it's no longer sharing, it's straining. Real love doesn't have to be perfectly balanced, but it does need to be reciprocated. A simple message, a timely hug, a "how was your day" is enough to let you know you're not trying alone. Because if you keep giving, and the other person never reaches out to hold on, you're not in love. You're filling a need. No one can keep carrying it all forever. No one can always be the one trying. When a relationship requires you to constantly be the one keeping it alive, you're loving in a way that drains you. A one-sided relationship doesn't break you all at once. It wears you down, with each silence from the other person, with each moment left unanswered, with each small hope left ignored. What comes next isn't as obvious. It's not you doing more. It's how someone makes you act on their terms, subtly and quietly, and that's far more dangerous. They say you should change because they believe you can be better. They say every piece of criticism comes from love, that they want you to grow, that they see potential in you. At first, you believe it. You think, maybe they're right. And you start adjusting. The way you dress, the way you speak, the way you carry yourself around others, small things slowly shaped into more acceptable versions. You don't realize you're being controlled, because there's no yelling, no threats, just soft words, repeated often. Beneath the surface of care is a subtle control. You start hesitating to say what you really think. You overthink every decision. You stay quiet when you disagree, afraid to disappoint them. And you call it respect. But slowly, you're no longer yourself. You fade in your own relationship. You no longer know what parts of you truly want to keep, and what parts you're forcing just to fit in. Control isn't always harsh. Sometimes, it has another name, expected love. And if you've ever felt like you're performing, pushing, trying to become a version that's loved instead of understood, then what comes next might shake you. You used to speak and laugh freely, sharing your thoughts without overthinking. But since falling in love, you've started filtering every word. You've become more careful with your emotions. You avoid saying what you truly feel if you think it might upset them. You've changed the way you dress, the way you carry yourself, even the relationships around you, just to keep the peace. You say it's love, but in truth, you're slowly suffocating yourself. When a relationship keeps you from expressing who you are, you're no longer loving with your heart. You're surviving with caution. You constantly ask yourself, will saying this upset them? You adjust yourself to be just enough. Not too different. Not too loud. Not too real. You no longer feel safe being yourself. Only safe being a version that fits someone else's expectations. The cost of not being yourself doesn't come all at once. It comes slowly, as you begin to feel like a stranger to your own soul. One day, if you look back and no longer recognize who you've become, you've grown quiet, small, living in fear of being rejected, just for stepping outside the lines. But the most frightening part isn't that you've had to adjust. It's when you start to believe that you were never enough to be loved as you are. You try to listen, because they say their feedback is meant to help you improve. They say the criticism comes from love, from wanting you to become your best self. But over time, what you hear isn't love. It's a string of repeated messages. You're not enough. You need to change. You're wrong. At first, you think you're being too sensitive. You tell yourself that real love sometimes requires honesty. But then you realize almost nothing you do is right. The way you speak, the clothes you choose, even the smallest things, how you sit, how you express emotion, everything is examined, corrected, judged. You no longer feel seen with appreciation, but through eyes constantly searching for flaws. Slowly, you begin to doubt yourself. Before you speak, you wonder if you'll be criticized. Before you get dressed, you ask yourself what they'll say. And you live in that relationship feeling smaller each day. Not because you're weak, But because you've gotten so used to being picked apart, you can't even remember what it feels like to be accepted. Arguments can be normal in love, but if the words that hurt you most come from the person you love the most, and it keeps happening, then that's no longer love. And if conflict becomes everything, what comes next will show you the truth more clearly. At first, the arguments were small, just disagreements about timing, preferences, a few misunderstood words. But over time, you realize any conversation can turn into a fight. A simple question becomes a spark. A gentle suggestion turns into an accusation. Every time you try to explain, they misunderstand. Every time you stay silent, they say you're being cold. You no longer speak to be heard. You speak to defend, to protect yourself, to fight off the feeling of being misunderstood. Every conversation feels like a campaign. Every silent treatment is an unspoken battle. And you're tired, not because of the conflict, but because conflict has become the daily rhythm. Love can't be a place where you always have to brace yourself. It can't be where you weigh every word, every glance, every pause. When two people constantly hurt each other, through words, through silence, through tension, the only thing that grows isn't love. It's distance. You get used to nothing ever being resolved, used to falling asleep angry, waking up exhausted, and by then, you're no longer living in love. You're living in a battleground where both sides are dug in. At this point, you might think, trust is all you need, but the truth is, some things run deeper than trust. They're gentle with you, polite with you, saying sweet things at just the right moment. But when they walk into a restaurant, they're cold to the server. When they get in a car, they're irritated with the driver. When someone makes a small mistake, they react harshly, even insultingly. And you think, maybe they're just tired. They're so. But in truth, the way they treat people who can offer them nothing, that's the truest version of who they are. You're seeing their best side. Because you're still in the phase of being chosen. Oh? But sooner or later, the way they treat others will come back to you. Kindness doesn't pick its audience. It's consistent, even when no one's watching. If they're only kind when there's something in it for them, only gentle with people who please them, only respectful to those they deem worthy, then you're not loving a kind person. You're loving someone who knows how to perform. And one day, when you no longer meet their expectations, you'll see the version they once showed to others. And if they start using words as weapons, while you have no way to fight back, then what comes next is something you need to realize sooner. They don't raise their voice. They don't directly insult you, but you feel hurt. A sarcastic joke about something you're insecure about. Averted eyes when you need to be heard. A long silence after you share something sincere. Then comes the line, "I was just joking," or "You're too sensitive." That's not a personality. That's passive, hurtful behavior. They don't say what needs to be said. Don't resolve conflict. They use sarcasm to shift responsibility. They're not angry, yet still manage to make you feel at fault. And you begin to question yourself. Am I overreacting? Am I being too much? When the pain doesn't come from shouting, but from small, continuous cuts, it's harder to see. But that slow erosion is what drains you the most. And any relationship that can't have honest conversations will slowly become a place where two people live side by side, but no longer truly connect. And in the end, even if both people are kind, loving, and trying, there's still one thing that can destroy it all: timing. There are people you meet and instantly know you want to walk with them for a long time, not because they're perfect, but because being with them makes you feel enough. But even in all that rightness, there's still one thing that keeps everything from lasting: timing. They might be healing from an old wound. You might be rushing through your own journey, both sincere, but not in sync. And when two people aren't ready at the same time, no matter how hard they try, everything slowly falls apart. You start pulling them into your timeline. You want them to be quicker, more decisive, more clear. They want you to wait, to give them more time, more space, more distance. And suddenly, between you two, it's no longer love. It's a tug of war. One pulling, one holding back, both growing tired. Not every breakup happens because of incompatibility. Sometimes, you love the right person at the wrong time. And if you try to force something that's not ready, you don't make it ripen. You just make it fall too soon. The pain doesn't always come from goodbye. Sometimes, it comes from staying, but not being able to move forward. Not the wrong person, just the wrong time. But sometimes, that one wrong thing is enough to make everything else no longer right. Love doesn't fall apart because of one argument, one fight, or one silent day. It breaks quietly, through small things repeated over and over. Things no one names, no one dares to face. You don't realize you're drifting apart until everything is too quiet to pull back. If you see yourself in one or more of the signs above, don't rush to walk away, and don't rush to endure. Pause for a moment, take a look, have an honest conversation, not to blame, but to understand where you are. And if every effort only leads to pain, then leave. But before you go, make sure you're not leaving yourself behind. If something in this video made you sit in silence for a long time, leave a comment. I get it. That's all. The ones who need to will understand.